Welcome, wanderers, to another episode of Echoes from the Loam. Spring-heeled Jack burst into Victorian folklore in 1837, leaping quite literally into the public imagination. Described as a devilish figure with clawed hands, glowing red eyes, and the ability to jump impossibly high, he terrorized Londoners with sudden attacks, eerie laughter, and even bursts of blue flame. Some say he was a prankster aristocrat, others a mass hallucination fed by newspapers and penny dreadfuls. Either way, listen closely, pay heed, and keep watch over the rooftops. Jack be nimble, Jack be flame, Jack has teeth and no true name. Leap the rooftop, ring the bell, blindfold tight or burn in hell. Jack be laughing, Jack be soot, claws like knives and boots that root. Hide your eyes and bite your tongue, he comes for those who die too young. Jack be whisper, Jack be wrong, he wrote the tale, he sings the song. Bury bottles, break the bread, but Jack still leaps when the soil is red. The fog was thick enough to chew. It clung to the brickwork like mildew, muffling the gas lamps and swallowing the sound of boots on cobblestone. Elsie Morn walked alone that night, her shift apron still damp with dye. Her fingers ached from the vats, and her breath came in short bursts, visible in the cold air like little ghosts escaping. She passed the iron gate of St. Mary's Chapel, and the bell rang once and then cracked, a sound like bone breaking. Elsie stopped, frozen, and something landed behind her, not from the alley to her side, but from above her. A figure impossibly tall, cloaked. His boots hissed against the stone. His eyes glowed red like coals buried in ash. His mouth opened and smoke curled out. He didn't speak, he just laughed. Elsie turned to run, but her feet wouldn't move. The fog had thickened around her ankles like hands holding her in place. He raised one clawed hand and traced a symbol in the air. A bell. Elsie screamed, and the figure whispered something in a language older than the chapel stones. And then he leapt, over the gate, over the chapel, and what seemed almost over the moon. Poor Elsie was found the next morning, curled in the chapel yard. Her clothes shredded, her mouth black with soot, her eyes wide and unblinking. The symbol of a bell carved into her palm. Inspector Thomas Vale had seen hysteria before. He'd catalogued ghost sightings, chased feral dogs mistaken for demons, and even arrested a chimney sweep who claimed to be the devil's nephew. But this was different. He stood over Elsie Morn's body, untouched by the night's heavy frost. The symbol carved into her palm was not random. It matched the one etched into the chapel bell, discovered only after the bell had cracked. They all took notes. No man could have cleared the chapel gate, let alone the steeple. There were no footprints, no soot trail, and only a single red shoe on the roof. He questioned the priest, and the priest told him it was Jack. Spring-heeled Jack has come again. They all dismissed it as an old folklore, a name stitched from fear and superstition. But that night, he found a pamphlet in his desk drawer. Spring-heeled Jack, the terror of London. It was dated 1832, a full 10 years before poor Elsie's death. He hadn't put it there, and no one had been in his office but him. He grabbed the pamphlet and stormed over to the fire, crumpling it into a ball and throwing it in. The flames seemed to turn a shade of blue, but he put that to his emotions and feelings running high and all of this nonsense of Jack. That night at home, he dreamt of a man with no face leaping over his bed whispering, "Who wrote me?" But when Vale awoke, he found his tongue was coated with soot. The second body was found in the churchyard, curled up like a question mark. No wounds, no blood. Just soil packed into the mouth, and a faint ringing in the ears of every town who saw her. Vale arrived before dawn. The air was thick with chimney smoke, though no fires burned. He climbed the bell tower. The rope was frayed, blackened, singed, and on the wall a soot-drawn figure, mid-leap, arms outstretched, legs bent unnaturally backwards. Downstairs a woman was waiting to speak with him. She wore a blindfold stitched with red thread, and her voice was hoarse like she hadn't spoken in years. "You've seen him now," she said. "He leaps when bells ring wrong, and he marks the soil with names." Vale scoffed and reached for his pad and pen, but his notebook was missing, and in its place, a ritual tracker. Hand-drawn symbols for bell, leap, soot and soil. 4 columns, with 2 already filled. He left the church and walked home slightly quicker than usual. The streets were empty. Every window had a bell hanging from it, some cracked, some rusted, some ringing. And that night, he dreamt again. This time, Jack stood at the foot of his bed, holding a blindfold and a bell. "3 rings left," he whispered. "Then you leap." The village was called Witch Hollow, though maps had long since erased it. Vale had found it referenced in a footnote beneath a pamphlet illustration left on his doorstep the next morning. Jack leapt thrice in Witch Hollow, where bells rang wrong and the blind saw true. He had driven through fog thick as wool. The road ahead narrowed and then vanished completely. He walked the last mile, boots sinking into soil that smelled of iron and ash. Witch Hollow was barely a place. 5 cottages all collapsed inwards, a chapel with no roof. A bell hung from a nearby tree, and beneath it, a plaque. "Here leapt Jack, 1832. Inside the chapel ruins, he found a witch bottle, buried by the altar, sealed with wax and filled with nails, hair, and a scrap of red cloth. He opened it, and the bell rang. A figure leapt across the chapel wall, impossibly high, impossibly fast. No sound, no shadow, just soot trailing in the air. Vale followed it outside to find an old man emerging from the trees. His eyes were milky, and his coat stitched with bells. "He's not a man," the old one said. "He's a punishment, a leap between sins. They used to blindfold the guilty and ring the bell thrice, and if Jack came, they were taken." Vale left Witch Hollow in a hurry with the bottle, plaque etched into his mind. And come night time, he dreamt of a blindfolded child ringing a bell whispering, "You're the third." He awoke with nails in his pyjama pockets. The dreams come too fast now. Blindfolded children crack bells, soot forming symbols he couldn't forget. And the villagers were waiting at the church by the time he was up and dressed. They wore coats stitched with bells, their faces smeared with soot. Blindfolded. One held a spare blindfold, another a bowl of soil. They didn't speak. They all turned to leave as the bell rang 3 times, but somehow off key, somehow wrong. He fell to his knees and an old man stepped forward. "You brought the bottle. You walked the soil. You heard the leap. Now you must blindfold." They tied the red threaded cloth around his eyes and the world vanished. Only sound remained. Bells ringing, soil being packed, footsteps circling, and then silence. He smelled fire, felt soot on his tongue, heard a leap impossibly high, impossibly close. The blindfold was removed to find he stood alone. The villagers were gone. The soot trail formed a symbol, a man mid-leap, arms outstretched, legs bent backwards. His coat was stitched with bells, his hands were blackened, and the witch bottle was gone. That night, Jack appeared again in his dreams, whispering, "You wrote me, you rang me, you are me." They awoke with a start, clinging on for dear life, somehow under the chapel roof. But the soil below was undisturbed. He hadn't climbed up there. He leapt. They all no longer slept, afraid of what would come. He wandered the village at night, tracing soot trails that formed symbols only he could see. Bells rang without wind and soil shifted beneath his feet. He found himself sketching leaps, arcs of impossible height, marked with red ink and clawed lines. His coat grew heavier. Bells stitched themselves into the seams. And in the mirror, his eyes flickered red. He'd even returned to Witch Hollow at some point seeking answers. But the chapel was gone. And in its place, a circle of scorched earth and the plaque half buried. Spring-heeled Jack. A woman was waiting there nearby, blindfolded. "He was never one man," she said. "He was a wager, a punishment, a ghost stitched from fear." And she told him of the previous attacks. Mary Stevens, Jane Alsop, Lucy Scales. Women clawed, blinded by blue flame, left trembling in alleyways. Jack left from rooftops, vanished into fog. Some said he wore springs on his feet, others said armour, but all agreed. He laughed. "He was a devil in a gentleman's coat," she said. "He was always a story, and stories need mouths." Vale asked the woman why him? Why was he chosen? "Because you wrote him," They all stood on the chapel roof later that evening and leapt, not far or high, but enough. And the bells rang wrong, the soil shifted, the soot formed a new symbol, a man mid-leap, arms outstretched with eyes like fire. The bells rang wrong, not just in Lambeth but across all of London. Cracked tones, off-key chimes, midnight tolls with no hand to pull the ropes. The soot trails spread their way over rooftops. Children whispered of a man with claws and fire in his eyes. And they all stood in the ruins of Witch Hollow, no longer wearing a coat of bells. It had become part of him, stitched into his skin, bells fused to his bones. His eyes burned red, his breath came in bursts of blue flame. He remembered now. He had written Jack. Years ago, as a young constable, Vale had penned a pamphlet, The Devil in the Fog, a cautionary tale. A fictional story of a leaping demon who punished the guilty. He'd based it on old stories, but twisted them, made them worse, made them his own. He'd given Jack claws, fire, laughter. He'd even given him a name. "You wrote me," Jack had whispered to him. Now Vale was the leap, the flame, the punishment. He returned to Lambeth. The villagers tried to hide. They hung bells, buried bottles, and blindfolded their children. But it didn't matter. He leapt from rooftop to rooftop, laughing. Sound that could peel paint from walls. He clawed through doors, dragged bodies into the fog, and left soot symbols on every threshold. The priest was found with his spine folded backwards, mouth packed with nails. The baker was burned alive, his oven filled with blue flame. The children were blindfolded, but Jack whispered to them, "You wrote me too." And by dawn, Lambeth was ash. Vale stood once again in the chapel ruins, surrounded by soot and silence. He leapt once more, high, graceful, and vanished. Only the bells remained, and they ring wrong. And when they do, the soil shifts, and Jack leaps again. And there the tale ends for now, but the echoes will always remain. If you've enjoyed your stay here in my domain, leave your mark, a review, a whisper, a 5-star sigil. Until next time, wanderers, I've been Fauna Blakewell, and you've been changed forever.